Broadcasting from Oklahoma, the tornado capital of the world, home of the Oklahoma City Thunder and the University of Oklahoma Sooners. This is the Curated Experience Show, a weekly podcast about the customer experience with viewpoints you will not hear anywhere else. And now your host, author, and customer experience expert, Amos Tanuma.
Welcome to the Curated Experience. I am your host, Amos Tanuma, with my partner in crime, Bob Furness. Bob, are you still with me?
I'm here, sir, and I love that you call this a show, and I love that I'm a partner in crime. So, always happy to have that title.
That's awesome. Well, Bob, I think the audience knows now. We do this on Friday. It's a good end to my week. Great talking to you and talking about the things you and I really enjoy. So, hope you had a good week. But today I'll turn it over to Bob. I think Bob, you're gonna run the show today.
Yeah. If you guys don't know already, Amos has several channels of training and information and ways to learn as a contact center leader, and impressed with all of what he creates. Always a pleasure to be associated with this podcast, and it is one of my favorite times of the week, and the favorite times of my job is to come and spend some time with Amos and talk a little bit about what we think is important in the contact center. And Amos has a new training session around sort of contact center 101. What is the name of the new session?
Yeah, it's the contact center management course.
Okay. So how long is it, Amos?
It's about 2 hours if you do it in one setting. Yeah.
Okay. But you've got it mixed up. You've got it set up so that I can do some segments if I wanted to.
Yeah. So about probably 48 videos and questions and answers. So you can break it up. I don't think any section's longer than 5 minutes.
Okay. Fantastic. So that's great. So tell me why now? What brought about? I know we've talked about all of these things, but
right.
Why are you building it now?
Well, number one, there was quarantine, and I can't bake bread. Everyone else is doing banana bread. But if you think about the first time I walked into a contact center, for me it was in the 90s. The way you learned everything was they just told you to go sit next to someone, right? The only people who got really formal training around the product and all of that were the frontline agents when you started with the company, several weeks long, depending on what you were doing. But from that point on, it seemed like training just stopped and all you got were just product updates. No one ever taught me in any kind of formal way how to be a supervisor, or when I was in workforce management and QA and what have you. So I've seen plenty of training there. And Bob, I would say the industry does a great job of catering to the I call them the C-suite and the senior leaders, because, they get, lots of deals there. But it doesn't do a good enough job, I think, for frontline supervisors. That's in part why, you and I pivoted this show to them. And this course, I think, again, will cater to just that lady or gentleman who is just trying to be a good leader or workforce management or wherever else within the contact center.
And as I understand it, you're talking in this session more about the contact center basics, not necessarily the things that you and I talk a lot about, which is supervisor and leaderships, right. But you're talking about channels and technology and quality management and workforce management and AI and metrics and all of the things that make up what it means to be a new supervisor or a new manager in a contact center.
You're exactly right. So, full disclosure, Bob and I have talked about, and I'm sure we will do a whole deep leadership thing around the contact center. How do you coach? How do you do that? And those kinds of things. But this isn't a leadership course in that regard. This is more of a management course, if I'm to draw some kind of distinctions. And whether you're a manager or not doesn't really matter, but it helps you technically learn what do I do with metrics? What is recruiting? There's this whole work for, what does Erlang C means? These things that may not be in your core job. One day you were the best agent on the team. I think Bob and I had done a whole show about that, where they just promote you and say, hey, Bob, you're now the supervisor because you were good at being the best agent. And then to top it off, they don't send you to a 6-week classroom. And I think, Bob, you will agree that the supervisor job might be the hardest one in the building. And you know how much I think of the frontline agent. But the notion that we don't send you anywhere, they kind of, you sit next to another supervisor, maybe you watch some videos here and there, and then you just learn it by experiencing it. So I'm hoping that this is the beginning of, a series where we can really, really help these folks. Mm-hmm.
Well, and I worked for Bell South Mobility back in the day, and so we had Bell South, and I was a supervisor, and I got some supervisor level, maybe a coaching class or a leadership class, or those kind of. I might have gotten those kind, but
Right.
nobody helped me with. Okay, so now you're a supervisor. Now I might get a little bit on coaching, but I don't know, what does it mean to have a quality management system? Are you talking about quality management?
Yeah. And Bob, when I was writing this thin and I had to think about the audience, I have a section that talks about the difference between service level and response time. Those basic things we learned from ICMI and those guys who pioneered this thing way back in the day. I think you could pick that up by osmosis. But to your point, what I hope this does is there is an agent or a new supervisor, someone who is like, I hope they do this thing, and you're not going to pick up everything in one sitting, but this can then give you a leg up. So yes, we talk about quality management system and separating that from what is the internal, where you're sort of measuring the technicals, to what's the external, whether that be surveys or what have you. So giving you that foundation, because as you know, Bob, more and more contact centers are even getting more specialized. I remember when I was a supervisor, I was a jack of all trades. I got my hands into, I'm seeing more and more contact centers getting really specialized. There's this quality team that's all they do, and on and on. And I think when you become a leader, it makes your job, frankly, the learning curve steeper, because while you may have very specialized knowledge about the area of the business you came from, you may not know what everyone else is doing. Hey, Bob, I'll ask you this. Do you think organizations get that if I work for Acme Incorporated, that there's a whole field of knowledge around learning what Acme does, that industry, and blah, blah, blah. Then there's the leadership thing. I don't think, have you found that most organizations don't get the contact center itself as it's its own discipline, it's its own, that you have to invest in learning that language and that skill as well, as opposed to just your company and your industry?
Well, I think in the industry we do, but I think outside of the industry, and it's interesting to me whenever somebody talks to me about, the financial services industry or the banking industry or the healthcare industry or the insurance industry, and I say something about the call center industry or the contact center industry, and there's a disconnect that exists.
Right.
But I don't know what the latest number is, but I've seen numbers somewhere between 7 and I think I've seen as high as 14%. I'm not sure what all they're counting when they count those numbers, work in a contact center or a customer service job,
right,
in the U.S. So
it's $25 billion a year.
I was just about to say, so it's got to be, it's as big as other industries.
Right.
And what's interesting about that is, I was lucky enough to work for a company. If I remember, the first time I went to an industry event, I believe it was Bell South, that I went to an industry event. It may have been before that, but it was an ICMI event. And what I found is, oh my gosh, there's all this knowledge that I had no idea about. Right? I didn't know that. So is occupancy high occupancy? sounds like to me occupancy should be really high in my contact center. So if I'm running
Right.
95% occupancy, that means everybody's where they're supposed to be. Not true. That means you have people getting ready to quit, right? And so they're either quitting or getting ready to quit. So those are the nuances of what we live in our industry. And then quality management. Well, quality management out in the distribution center means one thing. Quality management in the in the factory has a whole nother meaning, but quality management in the call center has its meaning, and
Right.
there is an industry around it. So the fact that you're bringing forward these nuanced industry call center management worlds, it has got to be a positive in our industry. Are you dealing with things like, what about channels? Man, there's a lot of noise right
Yeah.
now in the marketplace about omni-channel and what it is and how do I get it and what about digital, and to a supervisor who was on the phones taking care of customers, to move up into a role where he walks into a room and he sees, here's the word omni-channel for the first time.
Right.
Omni-channel, what does that mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Are you talking about those things?
I do. I mean, so the place we start really is there, right? So what I do want to do is, I think that the world is getting more sophisticated. So, I kind of take you through this walk where we start with the channel strategy, right? Then we go into, what channels do you pick, Omni, issue the channel mapping. And I think, Bob, I think you and I have talked about this, that the idea is that, I didn't go as deep because I know that, maybe this person is not in the room when channels are being selected. But the idea is not, now that you're a brand new supervisor, imagine, I'm just putting myself in that shoes. Imagine if I had this level of at least understanding, I think the leg up it could give me in my career, as opposed to just learning about osmosis. So I think that's the deal. And the beauty of, you asked the question, why now and is also that as we are launching them in all of these platforms, we'll have them on our site, on Udemy, or wherever else you get your training, is we can update them in real time, right? So that if tomorrow, we learn the this is an area that we need to add, we'll add that. And most of these platforms have this lifetime membership, so it'll be an ongoing sort of deal. And I'm hoping that we build into other series as well. Would love to. One of the ones on the list, and I think Bob won't mind me saying it, is that we've kicked around the idea of doing a leadership one, and frankly, it's a lot of the things you guys have heard Bob talk about over the last year that we can package in a way that's referenceable and folks can go get it and put to use.
Yeah, and even that one, I think that our goal will be to make it relevant to the call center. So I've got leadership is a pretty big word. I've got John Maxwell level leadership, the concepts of how do I become a good leader? How do I build leadership concepts into my day-to-day walk as a person? That's a leadership level. But I think where I want us to go is, what does it mean to be a supervisor as a leader?
Exactly.
So things like managing up. How do you manage up into your to the call center manager, the call center director? Things like coaching and feedback and managing my day and those kind of scenarios. That, again, remembering back as a supervisor, I may have been one of the best reps on Thursday, but on Monday I was the worst supervisor when I got promoted, and that's because of what you just said. Nobody told me what it meant to have to be a supervisor. There wasn't a training handoff.
Exactly. So you were coupling together sort of general leadership, industry knowledge, some of the deal, and exactly. So I think that's a definite need, and so I'm excited.
So what's something that you remember when you became a manager in a contact center for the first time? What's something you remember that it took you 2 or 3 months, and you were making the motions, and then you go, oh my gosh, what? How could I not know that? You got any?
Yeah. There's several. I think probably my biggest one was the workforce guys would never let anyone on my team get their coaching done, and I just thought the guy just hated me. like, like I would go find the guy in the smoking area and go like, why are you? And he would try all of these things to explain to me, and I would say to him, well, just stop.
I can see you outside with an unlit cigarette hanging off your lip, and you're just standing out there among all the smokers.
Yeah, I don't even
just
smoke.
trying to
I'm
fit
allergic.
in so you can find out how do I get access to my people, man.
I am allergic to that deal. But I was desperate. Like, he was killing me, and it took me. Like, I harassed him so much. He sat down with me and said, look, your team works in the peak area. We were in the TV business. And he goes like, there's no amount of bodies. You're never, as long as your team works this shift, like, these are the days. And he explained it to me in a way that I got. And that was kind of one of the failings of what we do, which is that I was promoted and they told me to shadow someone. I shadowed them for weeks. I watched what they do, picked up some of their good and bad habits, and then went and replicated them. And then I just had to go figure out how some of those things work. So that was one of the ones that I just thought it was personal. And what I know now, I completely get it. And as I was wanting to pull people off the phones, and service levels would be in the 20s and 30s. And what he was trying to explain to me is, because it's the peak, it will never be a good time. And now, you and I obviously get that very clearly.
For me, it was that first meeting with ICMI, and that the fact that what occupancy meant, and why I had calls on hold. Like, I didn't understand the power of one. I didn't understand that, people being on breaks was killing me. That an extra 5 minutes on the front end, with somebody leaving an extra 5 minutes on the back end, leaving an extra 5 minutes early on the front end, meant I had 20% less staff than I did the moment before. So I'm really excited about this training. What other areas have we not talked about? What other areas do you think people will want to make sure they pay attention to?
Yeah, no, great question. I would say that the area that I am particularly excited about is also things like knowledge management and social, which tends to go in the back corners. I think that, as with COVID and some of the other things we've talked about, Bob, I think that there'll be an acceleration of some of the trends we've talked about. So channels, Omni, whatever you want to call it. So, there's still companies that have their social teams isolated from, separated from the rest of the deeper contact centers. And as customers are pushing more and more and more to these more digital channels, increasingly knowledge management and the ability to manage these other channels will be more front and center. And if you're a new supervisor, it's something you have to pay attention to. So that would be one area. And then the last one's around scorecards. That's another conversation that doesn't get had enough. We talk a lot about the metrics and all of that, but how do you, as a frontline supervisor, figure out how to manage scorecards and to what audiences? So yeah, there are some obscure areas, and again, as we get feedback, we'll continue to add stuff.
Yeah, scorecards are a bane of your existence as a supervisor unless you understand what the drivers are, right?
Exactly. How did you learn in your deal? Like, I know you didn't have formal training and all of that, but what was your path? What path are we trying to avoid for folks who are listening to this?
Well, I think, I was working as an agent in a Greyhound bus line call center that was brand new. The fact that it was brand new meant that it was they had moved everything from local cities to this call center in North Carolina, and I had chosen to move my family there and be one of the first 25 employees out of a 300 position contact center. This was way back in the early 80s, so it was unheard of outside of the travel industry.
Right.
But I had good people around me. I had good people. I worked the late shift, so I was able to sort of sit with a supervisor before I became a supervisor. I was trying to figure out how it worked. So I learned the same way you said. I learned by sitting with someone else. There was no training. We had excellent product training. We had
Right.
excellent training around systems, how to
Right.
use a telephone system, but we did not have any training to become a supervisor. And I learned I learned how to be a positive supervisor. For instance, we had two different ACDs in the same in the same call center, and literally you could not disperse calls between the two ACDs. We were big enough that it was only 90 positions in each side of the room. And what would happen is it would snow in Cleveland, and everybody in Cleveland's getting killed on that side of the room, and everybody on the other side is in Miami, and it's nice. And so I learned early that I could walk over to John and I could go, "Hey John, please move over to the busy side of the room." And
Right.
John would move over and he would be pissed off, and he wouldn't do anything, right? He would take less calls than he was taking in Miami. And I realized that I would walk over to that group and I would go, "Hey guys, we're getting killed on the other side of the room. Is there anybody here that would mind moving over and helping us out for an hour or so?" And what I found out is when you volunteered to move to the busy side of the room, your goal was to get it down so that you could go back.
Mm.
And so I by being on the night shift by myself, I learned as a new supervisor that honey, draws more flies than lemonade than
Right.
lemons. So I just figured out some basic concepts that I realized after the fact. I didn't know I was learning, but I learned by doing, and then had some great leadership. I can't impress enough, and if you haven't talked about this in your session, this concept of mentorship,
Yeah.
this concept of having a mentor, we'll definitely need to cover that. But um, I'm so impressed with the fact that you're talking about the industry items, the
Right.
things that we don't normally talk about. Um, you know, I've been guilty of promoting supervisors
Yep.
and spending a couple of hours with them, running through some reports and going, "Here's your team, have at it." Um,
Right.
so the fact that I can now go to somewhere, spend a couple of hours, and you'll be surprised how much understanding the industry helps you become a better supervisor,
Yeah.
but how fast people around you begin to relate to the fact that you know the words, you
Yep.
understand the concepts. That when I talk about a digital channel, you understand, for instance, that email is a digital channel.
Right.
May or may not know that, but it is. So if you're with your focus on channels and the foundation of the technology, and then sort of building outward towards the customer, that makes total sense to me, man.
Yeah. And what we're trying to do is, you know, this is an accidental career, meaning there's no contact center major in universities, to my knowledge. And so what happens is all of us, one way or the other, we accidentally get here. And so there's some of us who end up sticking around. And my hope is that, man, this just gives you a leg up, whatever your path is, to help you in your current role. And to the extent that you want to join some of us lifers, you will be, my gosh, at a depending on where you are in your career, you would walk into the room, and the idea that you have this library there that allows you to speak the language, understand the concepts, see how they all interrelate. I think the sky will be the limit for anyone who picks up on that earlier rather than later.
Could not agree more, and so happy to be a small part of what you're doing. We're probably coming down to the end of the wrap up. Any one last thing that you want to tell us about the training?
Yeah, the last thing I would say is, it's built so that you can go take the training on your own as an individual, but we also do them to entire companies and white label them. So all of that will be available. And Bob, I really appreciate you taking the time and indulging me in talking about this. But as you know, we have a passion for helping this group, and I think
absolutely,
this will do
it. Absolutely. Thanks a lot, Amos. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thanks, Bob. And until next time, remember, the experience is either random or intentionally curated. I'll talk to you soon.
Thanks for listening to The Curated Experience with Amos Tanuma. If you like what you just heard, we hope you'll join the conversation online by visiting us at curatedcx.com or at amostanuma.com. That's curatedcx.com or AMASTENUMAH.com. And please invite your friends and colleagues to visit our website or iTunes, where they can check this and previous podcasts. This has been a Bien LLC production. Check us next time for another edition of The Curated Experience.